So this is the second video for communication, and this time we're going to talk about dominance hierarchies. Okay, so here we see a carcass. Here we have a zebra laying down, and we have a bunch of different animals, if you look closely, coming in. And each of these animals obviously are hungry and want to feed. So we have an African lion here, looks like a young male. We have a hyena here in the background, and then we have some vultures coming in. And so what happens with these dominance hierarchies, it can be within a single species, or it can actually be between individuals of the same species. And what happens is you don't want to expend a lot of energy maintaining these hierarchies if possible. So there are some ritualistic behaviors you see that kind of set the tone. And once they're established, it's pretty easy to keep. So what we want to do is go through and look at how some of these could be set up for certain. I've picked a few species. And so here the lion comes in, probably the most aggressive. Hyenas are smaller, couldn't take on a full-on lion, but they're in groups. So a group of hyenas could push a lion off a prey item. Depends on how hungry the lion is, will depend on how much he stays on it. And then the vultures come in kind of on the sides, one of the later ones to eat, or they're tolerated because they'll pull a piece off and just get out of the way. But when limited food supply, there is a major fight. So we're going to look at some different species. Talk with rhesus monkeys, one of the better primates that has been studied. And in these hierarchies, it turns out mother's rank is number one. It is a female oriented group. And so the dominant female is the one that pretty much decides where everybody's going to eat and go and those kinds of things. And so what happens is when you're born, where your status is in the community is really the status of your mother. So if you have a high-ranking mom, you're high in the group, and if you have a low-ranking mom, life is not as fun. Males are actually pushed out, usually around 3.5 years old. And this is done because, again, we don't want inbreeding. So you often see one of the sexes, after they start getting close to maturity, being pushed out. In this group, it's the male. And so when he goes into a new situation with new females, really his new ranking is going to be on which female accepts him as part of the group. And so he'll work his way in, trying to become a favorite of the dominant female. Dominant males, on the other hand, they don't lead the group, and actually there's been studies saying they're not even the ones having the most kids. The dominant males tend to stay out of fights. What you will find, though, is during breeding season especially, testosterone levels are high. And so what they consider the dominant male usually is the one with the highest testosterone and steroids. And it turns out one of the things they think is that aggressive behavior and then positioning and trying to stay dominant will actually take away from the periods of time where they could actually breed. So it's often one of the lesser males that may be having more offspring. So for some of you in this class, there's hope. There's hope for you. All right, we did this one already, kind of, dominance hierarchies and then infanticide, very common. The new male takes over the pride. And we've already really talked about this. And the one number I didn't give you is on the bottom, is the quarter of the cub deaths are attributed to this. So that's pretty high, 1 out of 4. But anyway, so we'll skip on that. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time on these guys. These are all vultures. These are vultures that will inhabit the same area on occasion. It's not typical. There are slightly different habitats. But there's a few areas of the world where they do overlap. And we want to talk about that. Now, first of all, you got to understand that vultures in general have a lifestyle that is all hierarchy. Those whoever are dominant get to eat first. These guys are scavengers. And so when there is a large food bonanza, a large prey item has died, they're the ones that want to eat first, because food is not like for a lot of other animals. Food is, you never know when your next meal is going to be coming from. So these guys will gorge themselves when food is available. And so let's go through who they are. I'd like you to be able to recognize who they are. This is the turkey vulture, which you look for is the red head. This is our local species here in Southern California. This is a black vulture. They're found in the United States, a little bit farther south east. Oops, I didn't go there. A little bit farther southeast. You'll get these in the Central America especially. And then down here on the bottom left, this is a king vulture. And you can see the brightly colored hair, not red like this. A lot more color to this bird. And then over here on the right, and it's hard to tell, but these are Andean condors. And they're quite a bit larger. They have about a 10.5-foot wingspan on the males. And they weigh in about 25 pounds. All right, so these are the four. Now what you have to understand is, again, the hierarchy and the aggression. And so each one of these has a different kind of characteristic that helps them at carcass. And so I want to go through these. Okay, so the one on the left, we'll start with the turkey vulture. They're one of the few birds that have a good sense of smell. Pigeons do, pigeons are believed to have a decent sense of smell. Kiwis do, but most birds don't have a sense of smell. So over here on the left is turkey vulture. They are very good at picking up dead things from way up in the sky. And actually a lot of the other birds will use them kind of like, oh, let's go check out what the turkey vultures are doing. Because if they're circling, there might be food. So often they're the first ones there just because they find it. The one on the right, they're a little bit smaller than the turkey vulture and a little less aggressive. But what they have is numbers. Black vultures tend to hang out in big numbers, so they will mob turkey vultures off the nest. Not the nest, off the food. The one on the bottom left is a king vulture, and they're called the king because they have attitude. They're a little bit bigger than the two top birds, a little more weight to them, and these guys are highly aggressive, and they will attack and beat up. And so if they were to show up at a carcass the other two were at, they would pretty much just chase them off. And then the last one is the condor on the right, and they are just size-wise, not probably as aggressive as the king vulture, but can do more damage just because of their size alone, their beak. And so, they're going to win out if they're there. So that's kind of the mechanism. I'd like to go off on a little bit of a tangent, because knowing that, this is how you have to work these birds in captivities and bird shows. Just to let you know, we had an Andean condor, we had two Andean condors in our show, and we also had a king vulture for a while. So let me tell you the story about the condors first. The way you work these guys is you have to be the top bird. You have to be the one on the top. So there are things you do to them, and again, you don't like to necessarily show the public because it might look like it's a little brutish, but that's what they understand. And so what happens is these guys will grab the neck of their other bird and push them to the ground, and that's kind of how you dominate them. So with a condor being this big, that's exactly what you do. We had a male condor, and he was good. His name was Leadbottom. He had fallen out of a nest when he was a baby. But he got along with pretty much everybody. He got a little rambunctious when he hit breeding age, which is about 6. But for the most part, he was fine. It was the female we had. We called her KC for Kid Condor. She came in as a youngster, and she had attitude, and she always wanted to move up the scale, move up the hierarchy chain. And so when you worked her, when I first got there, they said, okay, this is going to happen. This bird is going to come and attack you. And it's not a real aggressive thing, but she's trying to figure out where you stand in the hierarchy. And so be ready. So the bird came after me, and what you do is, as she attacked me, I went toward her. You grab them by the back of the neck. You kind of wrap your arms around their wings, You push them to the ground and kind of drag their, head through the dirt a little bit, screaming at them. She kind of gets it. She just got muffed up by a larger condom. And then what we would do is pick her up and you toss her, just toss her away from you. And the funny thing about her is she would attack twice. Everybody, she would be ready. So she'd come right back at you, and then you do it again. And then she'd figure it out for a while. Well, she was always testing, testing. And so you just have to be aware of it. Well, I've been there long enough, and I got her attention enough that I had no problem. It was funny. We would run them up a hillside, and they would run like a dog behind you. But she would actually, every once in a while, you can almost see it in her face if you were watching her. She's today I'm going to test it. And so she'll come running up behind you and attack you. Well, I got to the point where I didn't have to turn around. I would be running, and you could hear her foot pattern change. Like she's, you get quicker because she's trying to catch up with you and attack you from behind. And all I'd have to do is raise my voice, and I'd turn around, and her head would already be laying in the dirt. Like, I'm sorry, I'm kidding. She learned her lesson. So there were two of us she didn't mess with, me and Catherine. And the rest of them, every once in a while, they would get tested. Calligrides was a king vulture, and I want to tell you about him because, again, these guys are highly aggressive. And so when we were training him, we had him flying around the stage and landing in places, and he was fine. And he'd do what he wanted, what you wanted. But what he realized is, and we'd practice with him with an empty theater, and he'd be fine. But what he realized is you wouldn't attack him in front of the public. Not that you're hurting him again. There's nothing, but the public doesn't understand you grabbing a bird by the back of the neck and kind of pushing it to the ground. It just doesn't look right. And so what happens is he got to the point where he learned during a show there was nothing you could do to him. So as he's chasing you across the stage and you're laughing in the microphone, how funny it is, he won. So actually he did win because we took him out of the show. It just wasn't worth it. We didn't obviously want to hurt him. So he got to go into a breeding program, and he's one happy king vulture. All right, another zoo story. Silverback gorillas have the same thing. Caesar was a young gorilla at the LA Zoo, and he was in with the dominant male silverback. And as he became a teenager, he became more and more of a problem. He was stirring things up, and typically in the wild, these gorillas would be pushed out. Well, the zoo had no place to go. So what they decided was they're going to give him his own exhibit and give him a female, and life would be good. So they put him in an exhibit, a new exhibit, and they gave him a female, and they released the female, and he got her. He kicked her butt, just tore her up. So they separated him. Oh, he doesn't like this female. So they thought, we'll try another female, did it again. Same exact thing happened. So what they finally figured out is, okay, we got to change our strategy. So what they did, they locked him in the back where he could see, and then they got 3 females to give him. And what they did, though, is they had the 3 females were in there together all the time, and he could see them but never get near them. So either in the front or the back, he had his days out front, they would switch, but always separated. And they did that for like 6 months. And 2 of the females he'd already knew from the introductions and the beatdowns. So what they decided to do is go ahead 6 months. And then one day they had the vets there and keepers to make sure everybody would be fine. They'll release the females out, and they were doing their thing. And then all of a sudden they released Caesar out with the females. And he went running up to the first female and jumped her. Immediately the other 2 jumped on him. And then the 3 of them kicked his butt. And basically put him in this place. And then after that, no serious problems. But the women, the females had been together enough to bond. So female power, you gotta love it. All right, and then the last thing is I just want you to kind of break it down, the benefits of having these. Cost, sometimes we saw it in the rhesus monkeys where you're so busy displaying and trying to be the dominant one, it doesn't pay off with children, which is kind of the first 2. So you don't get to do the breeding, you're not having the children. And achieving ring may have reproductive costs, just having the high costs of testosterone. Testosterone actually is not necessarily great for the system, for the body. it does damage. Okay, and then some of the benefits is once the hierarchy's set up, there's less energy. You don't, you kind of look at them and whatever. Hey, don't make me kick your ass. So things like that help. Less stress among the individuals. Once a hierarchy has been situated, typically stress overall of all the individuals are pretty low. Once everybody knows their place. That's why Caesar was a problem, because he was trying to kind of take over, and the stress level of the whole group had gone up. And then what they actually found out is higher testosterone levels in some of the males that were productive, not to the level that was dangerous, but it actually turned out to be a better deal. So overall, these do work. So I want you to know the costs and benefits, and we will call that lecture.